I'm the Dean of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences here at Hofstra, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this afternoon's discussion, which is part of our exciting series entitled Educate 08 in preparation for the presidential debate which will occur here at Hofstra this October. We have two very distinguished guests today. My role is simply to get the ball rolling, and I'm sure that these two gentlemen will be able to take it from there. And then we will have some time at the end of the session today for questions. Paul Begala, the person on my right, who really should be on the left, is I don't know who put him there, but it's a good job, is a widely recognized commentator on political affairs and Democratic Party strategist who has advised a number of prominent political candidates. Mr. Begala first rose to prominence in 1992 when his firm, Carville and Begala, helped elect President Bill Clinton. In addition to orchestrating that campaign, Mr. Begala's firm was instrumental in the election victories of Senate candidate Harris Wofford in Pennsylvania, gubernatorial candidates Zell Miller and Robert Casey in Georgia and Pennsylvania, and the re-election of Senator Frank Luntz in New Jersey. Mr. Begala served as counselor to President Clinton in the White House, where he helped refine and defend the administration's agenda, from the State of the Union address to a variety of economic, domestic, and international issues. Following his service in the Clinton administration, Mr. Begala became a television commentator, among other things. He co-hosted MSNBC's political talk show Equal Time, and appeared along with James Carville, Robert Novak, and Tucker Carlson on the CNN debate program Crossfire. He is currently a commentator for CNN. Mr. Begala earned his undergraduate and law degrees from the University of Texas at Austin and the University of Texas School of Law, respectively. After leaving the White House, he became a research professor of government and public policy at Georgetown University, and in 2007 was named the Carl Sanders Distinguished Scholar in Political Leadership at the University of Georgia School of Law. He's the author of several New York Times best-selling books, including Is Our Children Learning? The Case Against George W. Bush, Buck Up, Suck Up, and Come Back When You Foul Up, and Take It Back, Our Party, Our Country, Our Future, the latter two co-authored with James Carville. He has also helped his friend John F. Kennedy Jr. launch the political magazine George and wrote the Capitol Hillbilly column. Frank Luntz is a nationally recognized specialist on polling and public opinion and an expert on the use of language in business and politics. Dr. Luntz graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with an honors Bachelor of Arts degree in history and political science. He received his doctorate in politics from Oxford University, where he once spoke for 24 straight hours as part of the Oxford Union Society's Guinness World Book of Records debate. We have until 4. In spring 1993, he was named a fellow at Harvard University's Institute of Politics. Frank Luntz has written, supervised, and conducted more than 1,000 surveys and focus groups for corporate and public affairs clients in 11 countries since forming the Luntz Research Companies in 1992. He has offered guidance to more than a dozen Fortune 100 companies and has conducted extensive testing for some of the largest travel and hospitality firms in the world. As a political commentator, he has been a guest on numerous television programs, including Meet the Press, Nightline, Crossfire, and so on. He also served as a consultant to the NBC television drama The West Wing. During the 2000 election, Dr. Luntz conducted almost 24 focus groups for MSNBC and CNBC, including live sessions following each night at both party conventions and presidential debates. He was the primary night and election night commentator for the News with Brian Williams on MSNBC in 2000 and for Hardball in 2004. In January 2007, Dr. Luntz published his first book, Words That Work. It's not what you say, it's what people hear. This book offers a behind-the-scenes look at how the tactical use of words and phrases affects what we buy, what we vote for, and even what we believe in. In addition to his corporate and political work, Dr. Luntz has held faculty positions at the University of Pennsylvania, Harvard University, and George Washington University. His op-ed pieces have appeared in the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. You know, gentlemen, this has been a very singular presidential campaign season. Apart from the fact that we have a woman or African American likely to become the candidate of one of our two major parties, it's unusual in another way. I mean, normally at this point in the election season, we know who the candidates of the two major parties are likely to be. This isn't where we are today. What happened this year?
Well, the voters got in the way. I mean, I couldn't be more happy about it. I think it's been good. I'm a Democrat. It's been good for my party. I think it's also been good for our country because it has engaged people as never before. And I really dissent from the conventional wisdom reflected in the New York Times last week, which wrote an editorial saying this was the low road, particularly excoriating Hillary Clinton, but basically saying the campaign, I think their words were, her campaign does no service to herself or her opponent or her party or the 2008 election. Well, turnout is up between 50 and 200% for the Democratic Party. Wherever this roadshow has gone, there's been more Democratic voters, more Democratic volunteers, more contributors, more enthusiasm. In a study that was done of southeastern Pennsylvania, right after the Pennsylvania primary, looked at the urban inner city core and then the suburban outlying swing counties. Found out Democratic registration was up 99%. Republican registration was down 92%. Well, as a Democrat, I consider that good. You know, I mean, that's good news. But I think what got us here is, on the Republican side, this deep burden they carry, this deep antipathy toward President Bush, who is now, I think, 27, 28% approval rating. So that's down. He's down to it. When you're 27%, which Ronald Reagan never was for a day, Bill Clinton never was for a day. When you're down that low, it's basically, you know, staff and fraternity brothers and his large and loving family, blood relations. That's about it. And so that has oddly turned the Republicans, and Frank can explain how. I think it was an act of mercy, an act of God, that turned them to their most electable Republican and to their most, I think, credible candidate, John McCain. My party then waded through the most talented field of Democrats I've ever seen in my lifetime and wound up with these two really remarkable people, Hillary and Barack. And when you have a field in which Joe Biden, Chris Scott, and Bill Richardson don't get a single delegate, it's not because they're weak, they're extraordinary. In any other field, they're the front runners. But they're up against these really two once-in-a-lifetime candidates all running at once. I mean, to me, it's all nothing but good. The question will become then, how do we sort this out for the general election? You know, and in a weird way, it's like we're putting all of our prejudices on display. I mean, Frank gives the data, but I've seen enough of it that huge numbers of Americans can never vote for somebody as old as Senator McCain. He's 93, he'll be 94 by the election. Huge numbers of people won't vote for an African American, huge numbers won't vote for a woman. And what we need is to somehow get like Mitt Romney in there and maybe Bob Casey Jr., who's a Catholic, a Mormon and a Catholic respectively, so we could have every single prejudice. We need Joe Lieberman in somewhere, you know, so we could just pick which prejudice we're going to like vote with or for or against. But I think it's all good. It's really good for the country. And I am watching this with untrammeled pride. So I think this has been wonderful. Frank?
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned a couple of points to respond. It's harder for me because I'm not going to defend the Republican Party. I come from that typical background. That's how I grew up, and that's how it was. But it's less, one of the things that's been fortunate for me is I've been able to move into a more nonpartisan career. It's interesting, I was asked what George Bush has to do in the final, and there is sound. And I can do this without the microphone, but they asked what does Bush need to do for his legacy. Give me three. New York Post is doing a story on George Bush's legacy. They call me up and say, give him 3 pieces of advice. What does he need? And I said, only 3 things: a noun, a verb, and some sort of punctuation. And as far as John McCain, he is old. He's the only one, I believe, actually met the guy buried in grad student. It takes him an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes. His favorite painting is The Last Supper. He's the second waiter from the left. It's fascinating because there's so many young people, with the exception of people in this room. There are so many young people who are voting in this election. You sure on a college campus here? We didn't just step off to an AARP meeting?
They're just a little faster getting to the
Those
seats.
are all the kids applying there. Just so for the kids who are here, I now feel like Dr. Kevorkian. I've watched the Democratic election with tremendous interest. We were talking before, we both thought that John Edwards was going to do better than he did. This man is incredible as a speaker. He will walk across this stage. He will make eye contact with every single person in this room. He will never use a note. He will never pause unless it's rehearsed. Pause. But when you sit him down, he's always watching when he speaks. He's always kind of doing this, because I think he's got brains in his ass and he can breathe. But Edwards, the Democrats, they can communicate so well. John McCain, Stevie Wonder reads a teleprompter better than John McCain. Look at his eyes. And he's got the three of them, and I'll make one other point about Obama in the speech, then I'll shut up. When McCain, you have three teleprompters, one over here, straight on, and one over here. Watch him. You can actually see his mental mind going, I know I should turn to the right one, I know I should. His whole body will turn to the right one, and he'll still be reading from the center because he's afraid. And then his eyes will go over to the right one, and he'll get really nervous and come right back to the center. The whole purpose of a teleprompter is not to show that you're reading it. We want to see their eyes. That is so important to us. And I watched Obama's speech. One of the best speeches I have ever read on race. And very courageous. But he had a teleprompter over here, and a teleprompter over here. And he never looks the camera straight in the eye, which is never looking the American people straight in the eye. There's so much that is inspirational about him. I say this as someone who comes from the Republican side. So much that I wish in my lifetime there had been a Republican Barack Obama, and there hasn't been. Reagan was, but in a different way. But when Obama needs it the most, when he needs to look the people straight in the eye, he didn't. And I don't understand why. This election cycle is like bumper cars. It's like the Derby, I've forgotten the analogy. With the cars that crash into each other, the last car standing. What do you call it? Demolition derby. You can't be a professor. President of the university? Let me give you a car. Obviously, it shows well then. Actually, I will say something to you. You got the presidential debate. I've heard of the programs you've been putting together here. Where have you been for the last day? I mean, this is amazing what you've done to this university.
Frank, you have 23 hours and 45 minutes.
Right. No, this is one of Carmel's old laws, too. Is a man never stands so tall as when he stoops to kiss an ass. So let me also... Obviously, thank you.
You didn't, for those in the back didn't see, he almost got up to get his ass kissed.
Well,
it's reflexive, although I know from teaching at 3 universities, it's usually the college presidents on the other end of those relationships with the big donors, and what you've built here really is impressive. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for inviting us here, by the way.
well, the people you've been complimenting is my employer, so I want to say I agree 100%.
Okay, enough of this ass kissing. Let's go.
You know, Frank, you've written in the past, I did a little research before, that personality is extremely important in a campaign. It almost sounded as if to the exclusion of issues, but I'll let you deal with that. To what extent did personality play a role in the kind of campaign we've had to this point? Paul, maybe you could jump in.
It's been totally personality, and I use the word character more than anything else. It's not personality just in how you relate to someone, it's the character of the person, the attributes that they have. What's more important to the average American is someone who says what they mean and means what they say, even more than what they're saying themselves. And voters hate this when you tell them that issues don't matter. But in reality, we're looking for somebody right now who looks us straight in the eye and doesn't tell us what they think we want to hear. They tell us what we need to know. We want someone who's a leader in times of crisis, even more than we want someone who agrees with us on housing policy. We want someone who knows how to get the job done, even more than someone who we may agree with on the environment. We are so tired of all of Washington, not just the White House, Congress as well, making promises to us that they haven't kept, and making promises about the future that are going to be really tough for the next generation, that we are so desperate for people who tell it like it is. Obama, we've asked the question, bless you. We asked the question, and it was a Sean Hannity question, and I got to admit that I didn't like it at the time, and it has been replayed and replayed and replayed. Name me one Barack Obama accomplishment. I did this about 5 weeks ago. I had a group of 30 Democrats, half of which leaned towards him, half leaned towards Hillary. None of the Obama people, one person in the room of 30 could name a single Obama accomplishment. He is not winning today because of his record or where he stands on the issues. He's winning because he's inspirational, because he's focused on the future, and because he's the closest thing to Bobby Kennedy that any of us in this room have ever seen.
Well, yeah, my own theory of a lot of campaigns is that the voter has a completely different thought process when she's voting for a legislative race versus an executive race. Even on the same day, in the same moment, in the same voting booth. I think when we're voting for a legislative seat, really whether it's city council, state assembly, or the Congress or the Senate, we're mostly thinking who's with us on the issues. Who do I agree with about abortion rights or gay rights or taxes or whatever? But I think when we shift to an executive race, especially the presidency, I think it's a much deeper act of self-definition. It is, Bob Dole said this when he ran against President Clinton. He said, it's like the question you and your wife ask when you're doing the will. God forbid we both die, who should raise the kids? And Senator Dole didn't like the response that he got, which is, well, Bill and Hillary seem to do a pretty good job with their kid, and so we all reelected Clinton in '96, but I think he framed it right. And I think that Frank touches on that. And it's, again, not to, we agree with him, not to the detriment of issues, but issues are, in presidential context, illustrative of character. Right? My personal preference, because of long, deep, close relationship with her, is to be for Hillary. Plus, I worked in the White House for many years. I have some shadow of a sense of what the job might entail. Well, Hillary and Barack, one of their few little bitty issue differences is about health care, where Hillary has a universal mandate where everybody has to be covered. Barack has a partial mandate where parents of children would have to cover those children, but not themselves. It's a pretty minute difference in policy. And of course, I'm on Hillary's side. And it occurred to me one day that, you know, and I worked on healthcare for quite a while. I'm not wholly ignorant about it. But I promise you, if their issue positions were reversed, I would convince myself that the lesser mandate was the better policy. Right? Because what attracts me to Hillary are the things that Frank talked about. Values, character. Those are the things that we look at, I think, when we're choosing a president. And I think that's to the good. Issues can be illustrative of that. But I think it's a much more, it's a deeper thing. And it's not the superficial stuff you hear, who do I want to have a beer with? You know, I think we did try that, and it didn't work out very well. I think this time around, it's the Bob Dole question. You know, God forbid Diana and I pass, who should raise our kids? And, you know, it leads some people one place and other people another place. But again, not to be too sort of Pollyanna, but, you know, I think we ought to be pretty happy with the choices we have at this moment. And the dirty little secret in the media is that these are really impressive people. And too much of what you get is predicated on cynicism. And you know, I know Washington has failed us all, but a whole lot of institutions have failed us all. And yet, American democracy, almost unique in the world, is capable of revivifying every couple of years. And I really do have great hope that we can use this election year to do that, and you all are playing a pretty important role in that.
And it's interesting you mentioned the Bob Dole question, because in fact in 1996, American people did want Bill and Hillary to raise their kids, just if the question was who should babysit the kids, that is slightly different.
Now, let me follow up, because Frank, you said that the American people are looking for someone who at least appears to be leveling with them. In terms of tomorrow's election in Indiana and North Carolina, there is a debate now between Hillary and actually John McCain on one side, and on the other hand you have Barack Obama about rescinding for some period of time the federal gas tax. How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, let me first, I want my applause. You don't have to stand up. My applause. Who in this room wants Hillary Clinton as the next president of the three? My applause. Who wants Barack Obama as the next president? Who wants John McCain as the next president? One lone kid up there. It's funny, McCain spent 5.5 years in prison and then he went into politics. Most politicians do it the other way. When you take a look at the situation with the gas, something that we did not talk about, and it's strange for me to raise it with you here, but her advertising campaign was not good as well. I don't know why, but Senator Clinton did not use herself in the ads until well into the campaign. Obama was all about his ads. It was his voice always. It was his presentation always. So it became about him. She had other people talking about her, and so it was this disembodied announcer which killed the interactivity, killed the telling the story. So not only was the strategy messed up, the actual implementation. And you don't realize how good Paul Begala is. If you've been on the campaign, I don't think any of this would have happened. She now has taken the position that the American people should get the money back, and it should come from the oil companies. There is no corporate component in the American economy that is more hated than the oil companies. The Unabomber has a higher favorability rating than the CEO of ExxonMobil, and actually than George Bush, but that's so the fact that she's given a place to pay for it adds to the level of credibility. And Obama's saying that this is pandering. Here's the one place where Obama could get it wrong, because he talked about the bitterness of Americans. They are angry, and they are anxious, and I bet a lot of people in this room are as well about the economy. And there is some bitterness, but we don't want our politicians. Jimmy Carter did not use the word malaise, but he gave the malaise speech in 1978.
No, don't give me too much credit. He used the word to describe it 2 days later. He described his own speech as a speech about our malaise.
But that was Pat Cadell, which is the danger. He's a pollster for Carter. Rule number one, never listen to pollsters. And so she's got the right framing of it. And I think that Obama could be in danger of seeming even more distant and not connecting to people who, when they go and fill up their gas tank, they can't afford it.
Yeah, they each talk about it, for me, slightly off where they need to be. If I were Hillary, I would point out, for example, Senator Obama voted for the very same proposal when he was in the Illinois legislature, and you could turn the old John Kerry thing on him. He was against gas tax relief before. No, he was for gas tax relief before he was against it. Flip-flops often work. They are useful, because, particularly against a guy like Barack, because a lot of his candidacy is, and I think authentically, the sense that he's not a typical phony politician. A flip-flop is something a typical phony politician does. He hasn't had very many of them, so if I were Hillary, I would exploit that. And then second, this piece that Frank talked about, the oil companies. I haven't heard her talk about that enough. It's true substantively, but she's mostly saying you deserve a break. Well, that's true, but I think I would also say you deserve a break, and guess what? Ha-ha, ExxonMobil has to pay in your stead. Now, on Barack's side, what he mostly says is it's $20 or $40, or it's not much, it's small change, and he's pandering, and you know, again, that's all well and good, but guess what? He has a way to bash oil companies from his side of the debate, which is, anybody here who thinks ExxonMobil is going to pass that 18 cents a gallon on to you, raise your hand, and I have some oceanfront property in Arizona, I'd like to say. Right? He can use all of that anger and anxiety people have, and the bit of bitterness that Frank talked about, on his side. So, I mean, that's just me as a Monday morning quarterback. But let me get to this point that Frank made about Hillary. I was astonished. She began the campaign. Her husband, who really is the smartest person I ever met, said, you know, Hillary is the most famous person that you don't know. And she is the most famous woman in the whole wide world. And yet, they never did a bio spot. They never introduced her. Frank's exactly right. People want to know what's in your heart, not what's on your mind. And God bless her, I find this quaint. It's naive, but it's wrong. She believes American policy should be like high school forensic debate. Here's my 14-point plan. Dr. Luntz has a 12-point plan. Therefore, I win by 2 points. Seriously, she has a 5-point plan on the bee pollen crisis. I didn't know we had one. She has more solutions than we have problems. But what they really want to know is, what's in your heart. And she could have. Well, what if they had an ad that said this, right? And she was raised a Goldwater girl in the middle class in the middle of the country. As a teenager, she went into inner city Chicago and she saw a sermon preached by a preacher named Martin Luther King Jr. And it changed her life. And she wound up at Wellesley and she opposed a war she thought was unjust. She turned down $1 million offers with her new law degree and went to Washington to investigate corruption in the Nixon White House. Then she joined the Children's Defense Fund to work for poor people instead of big corporations, and particularly the most vulnerable children in our society. Then she followed her heart to Arkansas with a guy who all her friends said had no future and would amount to nothing. Pretty unconventional person in a time of great change. This is somebody who can bring that kind of change. That sort of biographical picture, you know, they're treating her like Botticelli's Venus, you know, born fully formed in the White House as the healthcare reformer. That's when most people got to know her. And I think it was an enormous mistake. I think she got a heart of gold, but her campaign keeps showing us her head instead of her heart.
Obama spent the last 96 hours campaigning, knocking on 500 doors, trying to find the final undecided voters. Hillary Clinton knocked on those same 500 doors trying to find Bill. Bill Clinton, and this is where he's going to disagree with me. Bill Clinton, I felt, was the best strategist and the best tactician, and one of the great communicators because he felt your pain. Now, in my case, he caused it, but at least he felt it while he was causing it. He has done her, I believe, and I will agree that his words are twisted and turned, but in the division, and this gets into race, and this is a very dangerous thing to talk about in the outskirts of New York, I think that he did her a disservice in how he dealt with Obama. It is one thing for a supporter to attack your opponent. It's also okay if a supporter supports his wife. But to have an ex-president attacking an opponent is something we've never had before. Not in the way that he's done it. And I do think, I'll be curious to get your reaction, I think that he contributed to the political situation that she's in right now.
I mean, I could not disagree more. Believe me, if she had listened, I mean, he is pretty good at this. He's the only two-term Democratic president since Roosevelt. So I think he kind of knows what he's doing. And I'm always intrigued, most of the people who say he's not helping Hillary don't want to help Hillary. That criticism usually comes from people who don't support Hillary's candidacy. I think the failings of that candidacy have been strategic. Right? I think that her original chief strategist, guy named Mark Penn, failed to recognize that this was a time of change. I don't know how you missed that when 8 out of 10 Americans think we're moving in the wrong direction, when the price of gas is $3.50 a gallon, and oil is $117 a barrel, and apparently hookers are $5,500 here in your state with your governor.
Yeah, by the way, I just want to make it clear that it was a Democrat because Republicans are too cheap to pay that amount for a
Well, we always do this sex scandal. We're Democrats. We make love, not war. And yeah, apparently the Republicans can't do either. Well, I'm just saying. But no, I do disagree. I think that the president's inclination from the beginning of this was to show more of her heart, was to introduce her more as a person, to run her less as a wonk, and much more as a change agent. And I think the problem has been, frankly, the campaign didn't listen to him. And she's been much better than her campaign, but she's responsible for it, and she's paying the price for it, believe me.
Well, as political strategists, you're advising a candidate who is very strong on issues, but is facing a charismatic candidate whose personality just overwhelms you, whatever your story might be. Do you go negative?
Yeah, sure, it depends. I mean, it depends on what, but sure. I mean, by which I mean, when I contribute to candidates, I write in the margin for negative campaigning only. Okay, I love negative campaigning. I'm like Alice Roosevelt Longworth, who used to say, if you don't have something nice to say about somebody, come sit by me. But this is what I mean by that. The media confuses negative with personal. Okay, I don't give a rip snort about, you know, the New York Times published a really flimsy, bad piece of journalism attacking John McCain's personal life. Had no business being in a newspaper, certainly not the New York Times. I'm uninterested in that. Real interested in whether he has political and financial relationships with lobbyists. That matters. That's negative. It's very negative. If I tell you that 64 lobbyists are running the McCain campaign, that's negative information. It's information I think you need. if I tell you that of all the people to chair his campaign, Senator McCain chose a lobbyist for the Saudi Arabian government. That's negative, but that's really important. As long as it's factual, it's about public record. So I'm all for that, because this is a mutually exclusive choice. You know, go out to the 7-Eleven, you can buy a can of Coke and a can of Pepsi, and nobody can stop you. You cannot go in that voting booth and vote Clinton and McCain, or Obama and McCain. You can't do it. It's illegal. And so that's why politics becomes much more difficult and contentious, because it's a forced choice of a mutually exclusive nature. But I like that. And again, as long as it's within those guardrails, it's about some public issue. Right now they're having, I think, a perfectly civil fight about the gas tax. Well, we ought to have that fight. I wish it was bigger about like energy independence, but okay, at least it's about something. And they had before that a big tussle about this mandate problem on health care. I'm all for that. And there's no evidence, at least in the Democratic Party so far, that all of this so-called negativity has done anything but help, both of them. So within those confines, fair, factual, about the public record, bring it on.
And I hate it, and it's one of the reasons why I got out of partisan politics. Why I'd rather report on it than corporate work. Because I got so tired of sitting down with my 25 or 30 voters and having them virtually cry on how bad the system had become and how people weren't listening and how they made promises that they did not keep. I can't deal with that. I just can't deal with the American people so angry and so cynical, with a lot to be angry and cynical about. I think that politicians, you would never say this about people in your neighborhood. You would never criticize people the way that you do suddenly.
What neighborhood do you live in? I hate my neighbors. The lady next door has these wiener dogs that crap on my lawn. I hate her. I mean, what are we talking about?
You're from Texas.
Go look and see who gets to be the associate dean in the English department. That's a fight. Okay, go see who hosts the afternoon cable show. You'll see more backstabbing than you'll ever see in a presidential campaign.
And that doesn't make it right.
But who gets to coach the Islanders? That's a fight. I mean, people fight over things that matter.
You want to see more negativity based on what he defines it. You want to see more or less. Applaud if you want to see more. Applaud if you want to see less. You got to vote that way. You got to stand up and speak up that way, or it ain't going to happen.
That's right. There is a place where there's absolutely no negative campaign. It's called North Korea. You want to move there? Okay. I celebrate those differences, and I want to fight them out. Again, as long as they're fair and factual. I thought it was appalling that the conservative right alleged that John Kerry did not earn those 5 medals he earned by shedding blood for our country. That's so far beyond the pale. But let's not confuse that with a very legitimate discussion about whether we should have a war in Iraq, or whether we should tax oil companies, or whether we ought to fix the Medicare program so that we can have competitive bidding for prescription drugs, or that. Those are what those fights should be about. But let's not confuse those two. Some things are far beyond the pale and really scurrilous. Have no business in politics, but a real fight about issues is what we need. We had far too little. I hosted Crossfire for 3 years, and more than 50% of the shows were about Iraq. And, you know, every single one of those shows, I said the war was a bad idea, that we shouldn't do it, that the Bush administration was not telling the truth. And I don't regret on one of them. I wish it had been 100% of the shows. And they were all contentious. But my problem with that period in our history, if you look back on it, there was too little fighting. There was too little negative campaigning. So I think if we'd had a lot more robust partisanship by the Democrats, questioning the lies you were being told by your president, we might not have this god-awful war. So count me as a dissenter.
You're making a big mistake. You can disagree without being disagreeable. You can challenge without tearing somebody apart. You don't raise your kids to speak ill of other people if there's a better way to do it. I want as much change as you do. We may not want the same change, but we feel about the same way towards the country. But I don't want the kind of change that tears people's eyes out. We've had those campaigns. It's one of the reasons why young people stop voting and stop paying attention. What is so great about Obama is that he doesn't engage. Now, you may criticize him because he was too weak on Reverend Wright. You should have put it aside. But the reason why so many young people have gone to Barack Obama is that he doesn't engage in that kind of vitriol, and it has worked for him. And if he becomes president, he will become president because he said no to the kind of negativity that you are promoting.
First off, there's no vitriol in what I'm promoting. And second, Senator Obama gives as good as he gets. He has said that Hillary Clinton is disingenuous. His slogan is change you can believe in. Now, by inference, what is he saying? you can't trust Hillary. Well, that's fair game. You know, I don't agree with that, but this is still, despite the president's best efforts, a free country. We have something of a First Amendment left. But I just completely disagree. Again, Frank is conflating two very different things. Conflating unfair, untrue personal attacks. Who does President Clinton sleep with? Which is, you know, who does Senator McCain sleep with? Who does any of these people sleep with? I have no interest in it. But I want a robust argument, a fight. This is America. We're not wussies. Go back and look at what they said about Jefferson, about Lincoln, about all of our greatest leaders. And they did it first in the campaigns, which I think toughened them up. You know, so I like that this campaign has been tough. For me, they haven't been anywhere near the lines, crossing the lines. I mean, there's been some commentators on the outside who have, but the candidates, they've been well within, I think, any kind of decent standard of civility. And as long as they're within that, they ought to mix it up as much as they can.
Let me shift gears just a little bit. We have a leading expert on polling here, and a couple of questions. Yes, it's you. A couple of questions about polling.
It's awful this year.
Pardon me?
It's awful this year.
Okay, it is awful, but just a couple of things. In terms, first of all, there's been a very bitter campaign on the Democrats, or at least it appears to be a bitter campaign. What do you make of people when they're asked, an Obama supporter, would you support Clinton if Obama loses the nomination? Many of them say no, it wouldn't. Or vice versa. How seriously should we take that this year?
Well, first off, I've been so embarrassed about the inaccuracy of my profession, I've started calling myself an upholsterer. But that has other connotations to it that I don't want to get into. The problem is, I believe the Democrats will come together because I believe that their dislike and hatred of George Bush is even stronger than their dislike of each other in the campaign as it stands right now. And so this 43% of Hillary's people that either said in Pennsylvania that either they would vote for McCain or would stay home, I don't buy it. It's going to drop down probably by 3/4. My guess is in the end, maybe 15%, even as low as 10% will actually follow through on that.
Is that a high number for the election?
We are more split. We have purple states, but in reality, there's this greater division between red and blue right now. And I think that it's funny because John McCain's got actually more trouble among his right than he does among independents, which is it's a broader topic. Hillary Clinton is a better candidate right now in certain states like Ohio, which is the most. I'm going to give you two states I want you to take home with you. One of them is Ohio because a Republican cannot win without winning Ohio. No Republican's ever won since 1900 without winning Ohio. And the other state is the most predictive state in the country. Has gotten it right all but one time since 1944. What state is that? Missouri. Who said Missouri? Raise your hand who said Missouri. What kid said Missouri? Right there, give that kid an A. It only got it wrong once in the entire election cycle. Although you're going to lose your grade if you don't take your feet off the chair. What do you think? Were you at home or something? Who raised you? So the challenge is for pollsters, and this is particularly a problem in Massachusetts. The exit polling had a dead heat between Obama and Clinton in Massachusetts, and Clinton won clearly. The exit polling had Hillary winning by 4 points in Pennsylvania. She won by 9.5. Had her winning in the first wave in California by 4. I believe the last wave was only 1 point off, and she won by 10. There is also a vote, a hidden, I don't know if it's fear or discomfort or racism. I don't know what it is. But there are people who are saying that they're voting for Obama who aren't. And the third thing is because Obama has such a high degree of young people, anyone under age 25 who wants to be polled by an exit pollster, anyone over age 60 just wants to go to the buffet. And so you have a huge difference in terms, you actually have a sampling problem which they have not fixed yet. And all three of them are contributing to really awful exit polling results.
I see. Paul, will the party get together easily?
Frank's right. I think President Bush got 11% of the Democratic vote, and just against Senator Kerry, just enough to prevail. And so that's where the line is. McCain could drift up to 15, in which case he's in business. And I think Frank's right. He's not going to get 42. But that's, again, I probably feel about pollsters the way Frank feels about negative campaigning. Okay, which I'd much rather have a campaign with no pollsters than a campaign with no attacks. Because you ask someone on the very day she was made up her mind, she'd been thinking about this for days, weeks perhaps, she'd been watching the ads, watched the debates, listened to them, gone online with her friends, and then she decides, okay, I'm for Barack. And then at that moment you say, yeah, but if he doesn't work out, you're going to be for the other one? No, no, no. Well, of course you're going to say that. And then Frank's exactly right, that number will fall way down. The interesting thing to watch will be, though, this question of prejudice in the general election, whether it's Hillary or Barack. This is an absolutely true story. I own a farm in the Shenandoah Valley, about 100 miles outside of D.C., and it may as well be a million. It's a completely different place. President Bush got 67% of the vote there, and they're looking for the 33. They're going to lock him up. And it's a very, very conservative country. And my neighbor raises goats. I buy goats from this guy. I raise goats on this farm. And my neighbor's guy named John. Like Senator McCain, he was a naval pilot in Vietnam, flew off aircraft carriers, real hero. Fortunately, he was not shot down, so then he flew for United Airlines for 20 years, retired in this valley to raise goats. And I love this guy. He's a huge political junkie. And so I like to pump him for information and perspective from the real America, particularly from an authentic John Wayne type of very conservative American. And so he came over this past summer. He sold me some goats. We're standing out in the field watching the goats get to know each other, drinking beer. Just like a typical day at Hofstra. And he says, you know, I hate to say this, Begala, but I think y'all are going to win. He kind of takes a drink of beer. You Democrats are going to take back the White House after all these years. And I'm starting to feel real good about myself, you know, and he takes another drink and says, unless y'all do something crazy, like put up a black guy or a girl or something. Okay, well, that's what they say when the CNN or the Fox News cameras are not on. Okay, that is real and it is out there. Both Hillary and Barack will have to push a heavy rock up a high hill. They're going against 220 years of unbroken tradition. And I mean, I say this as a middle-aged straight white male. It could not be merit 43 times in a row, right? So, but on the good side, if you're a Democrat like I am, is if ever we were going to, in the words of my neighbor John, elect a black guy or a girl, it's this year. Despite Senator McCain's really remarkable political profile and his great strength as a candidate, if ever there was a time for the Democrats to break through those prejudices, it's a time when the president is really hated as he is, and the country seems to be moving in the wrong direction with an unpopular war and a failing economy. I mean, if ever there was a chance to break through, it's now. And I think perhaps people sense that. That's why turnout is up so high and people are so excited.
We had this in 2000. I had the opportunity to go to Arkansas. I went to 28 states to interview thousands of voters face to face. And the mayor of a town in Arkansas, on camera, says to me, well, I'm not sure about this Lieberman guy. If he were, and I quote, if he were a Christian Jew, I could vote for him. Wow. I wanted to say, what the F in hell is a Christian Jew? And then he says, but he's one of them, what do you call them, Hasidim? They don't know. There's code, there is still code in this country that exists, and it blew me away. And by the way, the key vote, which you haven't asked, but it's a question you should ask, so I'll ask it for you.
Please.
In your voice. The most important segment, I think, the segment that's really going to be up for grabs is the Latino vote. And they were trending towards the Democrats. Bush tried to push an immigration policy that was not offensive to them. The Republicans in Congress attacked it, which was offensive to them. John McCain has a very good record with Latinos and has done quite well in Arizona with them. Their number one attribute right now, what they define as the American dream, is home ownership. More than any other segment of the population. So what's happening in the whole economy is very frightening to them. Anheuser-Busch is the most wonderful commercial where they have this young girl who's leaving her house for the last time because she just got married. So she's saying goodbye to her mother, father, she's crying. Her parents are crying, her husband's crying. She walks out the door, shuts it behind her, goes down the stairs into the street, across the street, up the stairs to the house right across the street from hers, goes inside, grabs a beer, and says, "Mi casa." For Latinos, that's the American dream. I'm Jewish. Living across the street from my mother's the American nightmare.
Well, I don't think we can top that, so we're going to take a few questions in a few moments. But first, Frank has asked or has a DVD he'd like us to see, and when we finish seeing that DVD, then we'll take questions from the audience.
I just want to show you 4 ads. And I'm bringing this because these are the 4, if you allow me to do the 5th, it's a Hillary Clinton ad. These are the 5 best ads that have aired. Fox has allowed me to test. By the way, again, for applause, how many of you primarily, of all the cable news networks, watches Paul on CNN? Bruce Oberman at MSNBC. MSNBC is the only news network with more letters in its name than viewers. How many watch Fox?
You know, I do 2 things every day. I watch Fox News and I read the Bible, so I know what both sides are saying. So I see Frank.
I would say you're reading the New Testament. I think you're reading the wrong Testament.
I can't believe what I believe.
What you're going to see, and the ad that tested better than any is the Barack Obama ad. It comes from the Super Bowl. It only aired once. The pictures are dark and it's a little bit blurry, but you're listening and you're watching the words. This is why this is so powerful. Read the words on the screen. This is Obama. There's no announcer. It's just him. And you see him in a white shirt, no tie, no jacket, totally casual. And you see audiences and people, and you get the feeling from him. You're going to see 2 lines. They start at the bottom of the screen. The higher the lines climb, the more favorable the reaction. If the ad goes above a 70, it's a home run. Of the 330 ads we've tested this year, only 19 of them have gone beyond a 70. I'm going to show you 5 of them. This is the best ad so far for Obama. Take a look. I'm Barack Obama. I approve this message. The line started on the right side.
An end to this war, and we want diplomacy and peace. Not only can we save the environment, we can create jobs and opportunity. We're tired of fear, we're tired of division. We want something new. We want to turn the page. The world as it is not the world as it has to be.
We can change the world. No candidate, since Bobby Kennedy's actually offered people the chance to make such a dramatic impact on things around them. Best Democratic ad. This is the best Republican ad. It's not a good microphone, but it's the best Republican ad. Rudy Giuliani actually ended up having...
New York City is the 3rd or 4th.
Rudy ended up having more wives than delegates. I'm waiting because he's going to hurt me. Yeah. He's smart. He doesn't do this to people he's worked for. This is the best ad. It's a 60. Notice that when he talks about the past, it's in black and white. When he talks about the future, it's in color. When he talks about the past, it's in slow motion. When he talks about the future, they speed it up. He's got all the visual cues. You all know New York and how it looks now compared to how it used to look. If he had run a campaign with this ad and kept it on, he might have been the nominee.
The largest government in the country. It's one of the largest economies in the United States. They used to call it unmanageable, ungovernable. A large majority of New Yorkers wanted to leave and live somewhere else. It was a city that was in financial crisis, a city that was the crime capital of America, a city that was the welfare capital of America, a city that was in very, very difficult condition when I became the mayor. By the time I left office, New York City was being proclaimed as the best example of conservative government in the country. We turned it into the safest large city in America, the welfare and work capital of America, and most importantly, the spirit of the people of the city had changed. Instead of being hopeless, the large majority of people had hope. So I believe I've been tested in a way in which the American people can look to me. They're not going to find perfection, but they're going to find somebody who's dealt with crisis almost on a regular basis and has had results. And in many cases, exceptional results, results people thought weren't possible. I'm Rudy Giuliani, and I approve this message.
When conservatives saw that ad, even conservatives, they looked at him and said, you know what, I can put up with the stuff I don't like. This next ad was the only humorous ad in the campaign that actually worked. It was for Bill Richardson. It introduced him in Iowa, and it was a great way to get the bio out. Again, the lines will start at 0. When it goes above a 50, it's good. When it hits a 70, it's great. One humorous ad that worked, Bill Richardson.
Okay, 14 years in Congress, UN Ambassador, Secretary of Energy, Governor of New Mexico, negotiated with dictators in Iraq, North Korea, Cuba, Zaire, Nigeria, Yugoslavia, Kenya, got a ceasefire in Darfur, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize 4 times. So, what makes you think he can be president?
I'm Bill Richardson, and I approve this message.
13 times they had to make a take. That was take number 4. I don't know what number it was, but the actor choked. You can actually see him almost do it there because the director kept saying, take a bigger bite, take a bigger bite. And Richardson said he doesn't know CPR, he's afraid the guy was going to punch him. There was a time when Hillary Clinton was going to be the president. And so all the Republicans were attacking her. This is a great attack on Hillary, but it was done by Mitt Romney. Romney said that his greatest mistake in running is that he thought that there were more Osmonds out there to vote for him. The guy, nothing ever moved. His hair didn't move, his body didn't move. And so what they had to do was they moved the pictures. You're going to see, it's the same speech. They added sound, and his picture will shift over in various places. It adds excitement that he didn't offer. Take a look.
Hillary Clinton wants to run the largest enterprise in the world. She hasn't run a corner store. She hasn't run a state. She hasn't run a city. She has never run anything. And the idea that she could learn to be president as an internship just doesn't make any sense. I have spent my life running things. I learned how to run a business. I learned how to run a state. I ran the Olympics. In each case, I brought change. And if there's ever been a time we needed change in Washington to bring strength to America, it's now.
I'm Mitt Romney, and I approve this message.
It was a good ad, but you actually can't move a human being to various blocks. The last one is Hillary Clinton on energy. This is how I realized what a positive, powerful message she's got here, and where she should be all over. In the last few weeks, energy independence, all over that issue. Because Obama doesn't know the specifics of it, she does. This is her best ad of the campaign, but it didn't start running until several weeks ago.
We've got to get serious about ending our dependence on foreign oil. We could create millions of new jobs through new energy. Let's start investing in what I've called a strategic energy fund that will put $50 billion to work with wind and solar and biofuels. And where would I get the money? I will take away the tax subsidies from the oil companies. They don't need more tax dollars anymore.
If you're ready for change, she's ready to lead.
I'm Hillary Clinton, and I approve this message.
It was absolute home run for her. The moderates, the people who walked in, they were applauding her, watching television. And she had the single best response of the entire debate season. When she stood up at the African American debate in Washington, D.C., and she said, if AIDS was the #1 cause of death among white women aged 25 to 34, there would be a moral outraged outcry in this country. And she got a standing ovation from a predominantly black audience. She lost that outrage. She lost that intensity. And that's when her numbers started to come down.
Well, do you want to add anything here?
No, this is a great question.
Okay, so please raise your hand if you have a question, and someone will come over to you with a microphone. And then please state your name, that's it, and then your question.
It's almost like the Animal House. I state your name.
My name is Julia LaRoche, and I have questions for Mr. Begala. Regardless of who gets the Democratic nomination, what do you feel is the best strategy to reunite the party before the election?
That's a great question. Two things. First off, it will, as it often does, rely more on the loser than the winner. It's easy to be a gracious winner. But will the loser step forward and say, look, this is who I'm for, and it was a tough campaign, but I was impressed in that campaign by the things that I saw in my opponent, and that's why I'm endorsing him or her. Second, nothing unifies a divided group more than an external threat. Right? And so I would make the case, which I believe deeply, that John McCain would, in fact, represent a third term for George W. Bush. Right? Democrats, independents too, most Republicans don't approve of President Bush. Senator McCain votes with Bush over 90% of the time. He is Bush on steroids in Iraq. Even Bush wants to draw down the troop levels somewhat. McCain wants to raise them. He wants to increase troop levels right away, and then, if the shooting ever stops, as if, keep them there permanently. Permanent bases in Iraq. You know, on the economy, he voted against the Bush tax cuts because he didn't think they should be temporary. Now he wants them to be permanent. It's like me marrying a girl that I didn't want to date. It's incoherent, right? Not good temporarily, but we'll do it permanently. He now has flip-flopped and taken the Bush position on Social Security. He wants to privatize part of Social Security. Democrats, I think, can unite around that, around saying, we don't want the Bush energy policy run by a man whose campaign is chaired by a Saudi Arabian lobbyist. We don't want the Bush Iraq policy. We don't want the Bush economic policy. We want change, and that's why I'm for the person who beat me in these primaries. I think it'll be hard, but I think there is, you know, Andrew Marvell wrote one of my favorite poems to his coin mistress, and the first line is, had we but world enough in time. Right now, the Democrats still have world enough in time. They'll stitch us back together.
John Kerry thought that he would win in 2004 by making the case against George Bush back then. And in fact, when they asked on election day, does George Bush deserve another 4 years, the answer by a majority of Americans was no. But John Kerry spent so much time beating up on Bush that he never presented a creative and a vision that the American people wanted to endorse for him. There's no lever on the ballot that says either not George Bush or not John McCain. You actually have to vote for somebody. And Kerry made the wrong, look, Kerry looked like the tree that threw apples at Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz, so we already had a challenge. But this is, if you run that kind of campaign in the future, if it is just about what is wrong over the last 7 years, 8 years, then you will have the same problem that Al Gore had in 2000 and that John Kerry had in 2004.
Your history's wrong. John Kerry's problem is he did not attack George W. Bush. He wanted to take a job away from someone. He wanted you to fire someone who you had hired for a job, well, who the Supreme Court had illegally installed in a job. And yet he didn't want to tell you why he was doing a bad job. He didn't attack enough. That was his problem. I was talking to the Kerry campaign people at the time, and they were saying things like this. Oh, we did focus groups in Dayton, Ohio. And in Dayton, Ohio, swing voters in swing states said they don't want to hear negative things about President Bush. Oh, that's when you double it. Okay? And I don't mean to offend people's feelings, but John Kerry lost because he didn't make an effective enough case to fire the incumbent. And I don't worry at all about Hillary or Barack being able to make a positive case for themselves and their ideas and their values. They're doing that. They've done that. They both have really, I think, interesting, exciting ways to change America. They better also make sure that they're drawing those contrasts. And believe you me, if you like the Bush years, you will love the McCain years. And the more they say that, the more they'll be serving their country.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Drew Bennett, a senior political science major. In the last issue of Foreign Affairs, both Fareed Zakaria and Richard Haas, President of the Council of Foreign Relations, commented that we're now entering an age of multipolarity and the dawn of the post-American century. Fareed Zakaria especially commented that our political system doesn't have the ability to shift and to break through the paralysis we're currently in. Do you both believe that we can overcome that, or are you less optimistic?
Well, first off, I didn't know that there are Harvard students here. I'm getting more and more impressed as the more time I spend it, the more impressed I get. It's part of the reason why I got out, is that I don't see that you can have a discussion. It's this discussion that Paul and I are having back here. I thought that John Kerry went way overboard. I guess I was wrong. But I just...
When he attacked Bush's military? Oh no, that's what Bush did to him. Well, what did he do?
He attacked all of his ads. I've got the complete set of his ads. Virtually every ad for the last 6 weeks. Now maybe he wasn't using blood and calling Bush a baby killer, but geez, he was going after the guy. How much more negative? I don't ask this question. I know how much more negative.
The first term he ruined the country. The second term he ruined the world. How you can't be negative enough on George W. Bush. But let me Fareed Zakaria is wrong. Most of human history has been, since nation states were created, multipolar. Yes, there was Pax Romana, and recently Pax Americana. But most of human history has been multipolar. Second, we have the best chance of adapting than any other country, because we have the most, I think, resilient and adaptive political system. And I respect Fareed, he's a really smart guy, but I think he's kind of looking through a straw here. We have the unique capacity in this country to renew, to revivify, and we do it every couple of years. The fact that we are so free is what makes us so quick and adaptable. I mean, I can remember in the 80s, everybody said, well, the Japanese will overtake us, and oh, it's all over for America, you know, and a guy named Paul Kennedy at Yale wrote a book called The Rise and Fall of Great Powers. We were the next great power. We were going to be like King Philip of Spain, right? Didn't happen. We revivified, right? We revitalized. Even President Kennedy, if you read any of the books, Richard Reeves had a really good book called President Kennedy. Kennedy worried all the time that because the Soviets had centralized command and control, it was only a matter of time before Khrushchev was right and our grandchildren lived under communism. Because Khrushchev's granddaughter lives under freedom. So, you know, I am an American exceptionalist. And I really do believe that this country, with all of its flaws, and I know people get upset and you know, they put the political business, it's the best system invented by humankind. And don't ever bet against our ability to change, adapt, and win in this competition. I think we are better suited than our friends, our frenemies, as to use a 20-something word, in China, better suited than the Indians, better suited than Europe or Asia or Africa or Latin America. I mean, why are they all trying to come here? So don't believe it's a fad. We go through these fads, and they usually coincide with failed presidencies. And so we decided simply that the occupant has failed us. We haven't failed our country. It's just the guy we hired to do this job was inept and dishonest.
And allow me to do
and stupid.
I have avoided the partisan. I'm going to make one statement on behalf of John McCain to respond to the half dozen against him. What he went through in North Vietnam, I went wishing the person that I hated the most. Twice he was offered the chance to leave, and twice he said no. And both times that he said no, they broke him. Literally, physically broke him. Day after day. Do you know how he walks the way he does? They broke his legs 6 times in the same place. It was the same kind of torture that my grandparents went through. And he wouldn't break. And here's a guy who developed that sense of you can't break me, and went to Washington and said, our campaign finance laws stink and we need to change them. And he created McCain-Feingold and reached across the aisle to a Democrat, and against horrible Republican derision, he won. He said the tobacco companies are killing our kids, and so he created the tobacco bill. He said that the way we choose justices is too partisan, so he reached his hand across the aisle, the famous Gang of 14. On issue after issue, John McCain has said, let's not talk about bipartisanship, let's actually do it. Barack Obama, who I admire very much because I see he's the epitome of the American dream, and something that everyone can aspire to, his actual record of bipartisanship is virtually nil, both in Illinois and in Washington, D.C. John McCain gives me faith in the future because he actually has a record of success in extending his hand against Republicans on his side and saying there has to be a better way. And he's won a few of them, too.
Next question, please. Over here.
I'm Michael DiNicenzo, I'm a history teacher. A question for Mr. Luntz. And perhaps Mr. Begala will respond as well. But let me say I'm struck, Mr. Luntz, by your redemption. You might become a soulmate of Bill Bradley.
I love Bill Bradley.
In terms of his book, The New American Story. But here's my question. In Pennsylvania, 17% of the people who voted in the Democratic primary said they didn't make up their minds until the last 72 hours. And 10% actually confessed that they didn't decide until they stepped into the booth and close the curtain on for whom to vote. We see that happening in a lot of other states as well, and I'd be interested in your comment on why.
I saw the exit polling for Iowa and New Hampshire. It's actually greater in those 2 states than it was in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvania numbers were low. That more people are paying close attention. This is why I get angry at undecided voters, because I don't think they're really undecided. Either they're just completely not informed, or they're just not going to vote. So many people are paying so much attention to this race. They are watching the debates. The debates on CNN were the highest CNN rated programs in years. ABC, the debate that was so criticized, was actually beat entertainment programming, almost beat American Idol. People are paying attention to this election cycle, And so some people want to wait till the last minute to feel like they've got all the information at their disposal. And what I usually say to them is, what you know now is what you're going to know on election day.
Well, I think it's a function of the happy situation that Democrats find themselves in. You know, yeah, there's a little bit of rancor at the elite level, but mostly people are voting for Hillary or for Barack. And they have two really good choices in my eyes. And I don't fault them for like hanging in there to the end. I am struck, like Frank is, that tomorrow they're voting in Indiana and in North Carolina. In both states, the published polls have 10 to 12% undecided after all of this. But why not? I mean, I do think if you're a Democrat, you can't lose. There's no loser vote here, you know. And so I'm not like frustrated by people who decide to hold off until the end. And I like that we have put these candidates through their paces. I like that each of them has lost, and in a humiliating way. You know, I think it's good. It's good for the soul. It's good for us. We show our character in defeat. I have 4 boys, Johnny, Billy, Charlie, Patrick. They're 15, 12, 10, and 7. All 4 in Little League. Okay? And when they lose is when they show their character. You know, Ronald Reagan lost Iowa to George Bush's father, and he was supposed to win. That's where the conservative activists were going to rally, and he was humiliated. He came back in New Hampshire, the famous moment at Nashua High School, where he grabbed the microphone and said, "I paid for this microphone, Mr. Green," and he showed his resilience and his character. You know, Bill Clinton lost in Iowa, which didn't really count, then he lost New Hampshire. And he came out and declared himself the victor anyway. He showed his character. It's like, I can't lose. Second place is a new first. Thank you. I'm going to come back again. I really win. And Paul Simons is like, what? Like, you know, he showed his character. George Bush lost New Hampshire. I happen to know Karl Rove is an old acquaintance of mine for many, many years. Karl told the governor the day before that election that he was going to win New Hampshire. He lost by 19. He showed his character, both good and bad. The good was he didn't fire a soul. Now, we later saw that, I think, cross the line into stubbornness when he refused to fire Rumsfeld, but we saw the seeds of that. And then he went to the farthest, he went from being the compassionate conservative to the farthest fringe of the right and really smeared John McCain in South Carolina. Well, that's part of his character, too. So I love that this thing has been long and difficult and drawn out. You know, we've seen Barack come back from some pretty tough knocks, really tough knocks. We've seen Hillary come back from losing 12 primaries in a row. I mean, so this is all to the good. I'm telling you, this is all good. And thank God neither of them have been physically tested the way McCain was in that torture. And I agree with Frank that that's a remarkable example of heroism under fire. It's also a very good thing to test their political courage.
By the way, we did learn from Reagan, because at that moment when he grabbed the microphone and he stood up and said, "I paid for this microphone," he called him Green. His name was Green. That was the first moment that we found that Ronald Reagan had a few little issues with details. But Reagan, I mean, I'm waiting actually, if I were advising Barack Obama, I would have told him I won't grab this because I'm afraid I'll never be able to put it back. In the Democratic debate, how many of you, by show of hands, watched it, the ABC debate that was on in Pennsylvania? How many of you watched it? I do not know why Obama did not, after 30 minutes, look at Stephanopoulos and say, "George, because you don't do this to Charlie Gibson because he looks too much like your dad, and Stephanopoulos looks too much like your snotty brother." You go to George and you say to him, "That's it. We've now wasted 1/3 of this debate. We have people dying in Iraq. We have an economy that's going to hell. We have suffering in this country. You haven't asked a single policy question yet. George, there are 1,000 people outside that door who want to hear the solutions to the challenges that face this country. If you're not going to ask those questions, then I'm leaving. And I will answer them because that's what the American people want to hear. Even if you're a Hillary Clinton supporter in that debate chamber, you have applauded that and maybe even given him a standing ovation. It would have been the moment that everyone saw him grab the presidency, and he didn't do it.
I totally agree. By the way, that would be an attack. And one that I highly, Georgia is a really, really close friend. Okay, we're very close. We worked together on Capitol Hill, and we worked together in Clinton's campaign, and then in the White House. We're very close. I'd have done exactly what Frank said. And I would have teed my candidate up to look for that. You know, Bill Clinton did that a couple of times in his campaign, right? Where Jerry Brown attacked his wife in the Illinois primary during a debate, and Clinton about took his head off. You know, he went to the Rainbow Coalition, where they had given a platform to Sister Souljah, who had, during the LA riots, called for black people to kill white people, which was really antithetical to everything Bill Clinton believed in. So he took that on. It's in those moments of strength that we find our presidents, and we're waiting for that out of Barack. I mean, I think he wouldn't be where he is in life if he didn't have it in him, but he needs to show it to us. And yeah, he could have turned to Georgie and said, you know, you're well known, you're well paid, you're well insured, and you're well educated. And you're asking me about my sartorial displays of patriotism, young man? You know, when all across this Commonwealth there's people who are living under that flag and dying under that flag and serving under that flag in Iraq, who are being ill-served by the elite in Washington and frankly media elites like you, George. I mean, just pop. But again, that's an attack. But he needs that, especially. You know, he needs to show some strength. And as I say, it's in him. Let's all watch and see when it comes out. We know that McCain is strong. And he has like exploded in front of me, and I like that. I'm not one of these that's raised hands because McCain has a volatile temper. Good. Okay, I think it's good. Hillary, too, is a strong person, stronger than garlic in a milkshake. It's Barack that we want to know, because he has strength. And so I think he needs to show that.
We have time for one last question. Ready? Okay. Sorry.
I'm JP DiMartino, a senior political science major. I haven't heard this issue voiced, but there's a good reason for it. I'd like to get both your opinions on it. If you think back, John Adams, John Quincy Adams, if Hillary elected, we'll have 6, possibly 7 terms ruled by the same, in presidency, the same 2 families. I mean, God forbid Jeb comes up and wants the White House. But I mean, why is this not an issue? Are we not, is the realm of the right stuff of the presidency become too narrow? Are we not raising leaders? What is the problem? Why is it great?
I'll let Frank have the last word.
Frank and Paul.
These are great kids. You realize this is really good. Are your parents here? Would you like us to call them for you? Knowing my luck, they'd be Democrats. Why are you calling us?
Pollsters always want to call you at home, preferably during dinner.
Yes, always during dinner. It's part of the change. What I don't understand, there's some of me that actually, we're not supposed to root for sides, and it's been first a challenge and then a tremendous amount of fun to remove myself intellectually and watch it as an observer watches, a keen observer. But I wonder what happens if Hillary Clinton wins both North Carolina and Indiana tomorrow. Not for the Bush-Clinton. She's got a great line. It's one Clinton to clean after the first Bush. It's going to take a second cleanup after the second Bush. Great line in California. Score real points there. What I wonder is what happens to all of you. 65% of you voted for Barack Obama, and you really think he's going to win. 85% of the African American community voted for Barack Obama. They think he's going to win. If Senator Clinton does well, she still won't close the popular vote gap, and she still won't close the actual delegate gap, the ones that have been chosen based on votes. What happens to the Democratic Party then? What happens to all these new voters? So I'm less intrigued about Bush-Clinton and wondering, what will your generation do if you feel you were robbed? And I know that if Clinton does become a nominee, I know that's how you're going to feel, because I've talked to thousands of you in the last few months.
Yeah, I think if she becomes a nominee, it depends on how. In other words, if she is seen as having lost the popular vote and then installed by the House of Lords, that's horrible. And this is a Hillary guy. I don't like I like them as people, but I don't like the idea of superdelegates. Let me be clear. The notion that the Democratic Party has something so fundamentally undemocratic is appalling to me. It is a function of, well, first of history, they didn't want another McGovern. Well, you know, McGovern lost, but he was a by-guy hero, and he remains a hero if you get a chance to read the history of that Senator McGovern. So there are worse things than losing, like losing democracy by installing 800 people who have more power, or potentially more power than 20 million. It is also a function of the Democratic Party's culture. You know, we have this system of proportional representation. Well, look, the Electoral College is winner-take-all by states. So the Republicans, call me crazy, they said, how about if we have a primary system that's winner-take-all by states? So that the primary mimics the general election. It would be as if in the NBA playoffs, In the regular season, the basket was 8 feet high, but then in the playoffs, we raised it to 10. Nobody would be ready. Or if, say, one team had played all year on an 8-foot basket, and the other team all year had played on the 10, right? The 10-foot team would have the advantage. It's insane. But the culture of my party somehow has become wussified, which is why I like when people say that Hillary is ruthless, because I'm tired of Democrats who are toothless. Okay, I want somebody tough. And we have this culture that says we're like 5-year-old T-ball. And everybody gets a trophy. Timmy gets a trophy and says, nobody loses. Oh, bull. You know, life is winner take all. And so should my party's primaries. And so that's why we have this stupid system where neither of them, Barack crushed Hillary in like 12 in a row. And he got an advantage, but not the advantage that he deserved, if you ask me. And now these last 5, Hillary's beaten him handily and has not gotten what she deserves. I intensely dislike that system. But if she wins out, if you're hypothetical, if she wins Indiana and North Carolina and then starts winning in, North Carolina is widely considered to be Obama country. He had a double-digit lead going into it. He's very likely to win tomorrow. If she pulls that off, that's a very big deal. And that's not illegitimate. That's not a bunch of super delegates taking it away from voters. And that's when it becomes problematic for my party.
Well, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Paul Begala and Frank Luntz.